Welcome to California in Focus. This is your host, Kenneth Shrupp, here with Madeline Shannon and her report on this new assessment out from the state auditor on its responses to whistleblower reports. Tell me, what did the state auditor find?
So the state auditor found more than $5.1 million in waste or improper spending by about 5 different state government departments in the state of California. Their investigation into these 5 departments ran from January of 2024 to just this October 25th, 2025. But the investigation into allegations of waste or improper spending goes back about 5 years in some cases.
Wow. And so what is the largest single instance that this report could find?
The largest single instance that the state auditor detailed in their report was from the Employment Development Department, which spent more than $4.6 million on service fees for mobile devices that weren't being used by department employees. More than 6,200 cell phones, smartphones, wireless hotspots that department employees used were being not used in a span of time while the department was paying monthly service fees. They hired thousands of new call representatives to help process unemployment insurance claims after the COVID-19 pandemic hit in early 2020. And since all those employees had to work from home, they were supplied with cell phones and other mobile devices by the department to be able to do their jobs. But not all those devices were being used over the last 5 years.
Wow. Some more context to put into this is the EDD lost tens of billions of dollars in fraudulent payments, leading the state unemployment system to still have an over $20 billion debt to the federal government to this day. It's actually the only state in the whole country that hasn't paid back its COVID-era debt. And as a result of that, taxes on businesses, this unemployment benefits tax is rising every single year automatically till that debt is paid off. And unfortunately, the fees and the higher taxes are not high enough to offset the growing balance on this new loan or this new debt to the federal government. So that's going to continue to be a worsening situation from the EDD. But in addition to the EDD, you see that this report also found issues with the California Air Resources Board. Can you tell me more about that?
Employees of the California Air Resources Board, one employee in particular from that department was overpaid for 15 months of extended leave, which cost the California Air Resources Board $171,446. That employee took about 2 years of extended leave before officially retiring. And once it was discovered that he took much longer in extended leave than he was allowed under the board's rules, he was retroactively retired in October of 2023 and was told to pay back more than $86,000 in the money that he was paid in his regular monthly salary during those last 2 years.
Still, that's almost $100,000 that he got to keep for not working, or she got to keep for not working at all. Tell me more about what the California Air Resources Board is.
The California Air Resources Board regulates air pollution and implements programs that are designed to cut down on air pollution in California. And they have a number of employees who perform certain office roles and service roles in that department. And this employee was one of those employees.
I see. And continuing through this report, we see people improperly taking certain housing benefits. Can you tell me more about that one as well?
Yes. So the Unionville Veterans Home, which is owned by the California Department of Veterans Affairs, had certain employees that actually lived at the home. They lived on site and they paid under fair market value for their rent in that home. And the department didn't report these taxable housing benefits to the state controller's office, which they were required to do for the employees who lived at the home. And because of the 2 years or so that these employees technically didn't pay tax on their taxable housing benefits, they may have a significant tax liability to the state because the Department of Veterans Affairs didn't report these taxable housing benefits for these two employees.
And also, the state and the federal government generally provide large subsidies for the construction of this veterans type housing, right? Where it's supposed to be for, affordable veteran housing. We do spend a lot of money on this. So another question is like, why are employees who are not veterans potentially even living in this housing?
Well, that's a question I would have liked to ask, but employees and representatives I reached out to at the Department of Veterans Affairs didn't respond to my request for comment yesterday when I was reporting this story.
Not a peep, not a single response?
No. I did get a couple of comments from two different departments who were detailed in the state auditor's report, including the Employment Development Department, but the Department of Veterans Affairs didn't respond to my request for comment.
I see. And when you did reach out to EDD, what did they say about these phones?
Well, they said that they made major adjustments quickly to deal with the historic demand of the pandemic, and that included the purchase and assignment of about 6,000 mobile phones to unemployment representatives and other employees of the department who worked from home during that time. And in that time span, department staff serviced an unprecedented demand for unemployment benefits and served in administering new federal unemployment programs for millions of California's workers. But once they were alerted to the issues that were inherent in some of these mobile devices that they were paying for that weren't being used, the department took action immediately and adopted all the auditor's recommendations and applied phone shutdown efforts right away. And they formalized a policy for automatic phone disconnection controls moving forward. That was essentially the gist of the statement.
It sounds like maybe it wasn't really an answer to the question. I couldn't possibly imagine purchasing and paying for over 6,000 phone lines and phones and simply not using them for years. That does seem like a difficult thing to miss if one is actually looking at one's budget. But again, the state at least has now corrected the issue now that it's been brought to the public's attention by a whistleblower complaint. Lastly, here you had two more findings here that you talked about, one from the California Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control, ABC, and the Department of Parks and Recreation.
Right. So employees of the Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control used department-owned cars for personal reasons and often drove those cars as their own personal cars. They would drive those cars home at the end of the day, park their cars at home, and then drive to work in those cars the next day. And at least one employee used a department car to drop one of their kids off at school or pick their kid up at school. And altogether, multiple employees using department cars for personal reasons cost the state more than $16,000 in expenses related to those vehicles that were being used for personal reasons.
I see. That doesn't sound like a lot of money.
It's not, but it was one of the departments detailed in the state auditor's latest report. And compared to some of the other improper uses of state money from other departments, it's really not a lot of money, but it was detailed in the report.
Well, hey, rules are rules. And lastly, the California Department of Parks and Recreation.
Right. So at least two employees with the California Department of Parks and Recreation used one of their credit department issued credit cards called a Cal card and let other employees of the department use their own Cal card and ran up about $6,500 of expenses that was not made by the employee whose name was on the card. In addition, $40,000 in charges were listed on receipts that two employees turned in that those employees altered or created to submit to the department for reimbursement and to show expenses related to Cal card purchases.
That's a lot of fraud. Did we learn of what's happening to those employees?
Yes. So the state auditor discovered that those employees did not financially benefit from the misuse of department funds. So ultimately, I don't think they're going to be charged with fraud. And of course, we don't know who they are because they're not named in the report. But there are two employees who were questioned by the state auditor in their investigation. And ultimately, the auditor found that they were not materially or financially benefiting from the $40,000 in charges associated with this CalCard misuse of funds.
One thing I was surprised by when I read the report was the extremely large number of claims that were filed, and the relatively small portion that were investigated or found to have actually resulted in fraud. I think on the first page of the report, it says 2,636 total cases were initiated. 74% of them lacked sufficient. Let's try that one over. Looking at the data here on the report, there were over 2,600 total cases opened, but 74% lacked enough information for an investigation or were still undergoing review. 23%, they did try to establish reasonable cause to investigate an allegation, and only 3% ended up being investigated or had follow-up work performed, with just 5 out of the 2,636 cases referred to another agency for investigation. Does this sound like a low or high number of whistleblower reports or cases reported to the auditor?
That I can't answer because this is the first time I've ever reported on a state auditor's investigation into anything like this. But I know a few people who would certainly say that it is a high number.
Thank you. Madeline, thank you so much for your time on this. Please keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.